Starting off black. Assassin's Ink. 2 black instant. The spell costs 1 less to cast if you control an artifact, and 1 less to cast if you control an enchantment. Destroy target creature or planeswalker. Well, destroy isn't exile, but if this costs 3, it's okay, and if it costs 2, it's actively good. So, it's pretty easy to get artifacts in black. A lot of those decks are just already playing blood tokens and treasure tokens. Hero's Downfall doesn't see much play, but Hero's Downfall is playable if it has the ability to, like, 50% of the time cost 1 less mana. So if this card is, like, 10% of the time 4 mana, well, even like 25% of the time 4 mana, 50% of the time 3 mana, 25% of the time 2 mana, that might be good enough. It's at minimum Hero's Downfall. Well, I think it'll be Hero's Downfall a pretty significant portion of the time off of Artifact, but yeah, the enchantment part seems like the hard part. Meat Hook plus treasure tokens, very easy to do. Yeah, Meat Hook's an enchantment, that's true. I don't know how often you're going to have Meat Hook. I mean, I guess that makes it like 2 mana at turn 6 or 7. Wedding Announcement. Is Wedding Announcement an enchantment on both sides? Brushstroke enables this card by itself. Yeah, in the context of Alchemy, that's exciting, huh? Spending a treasure on this still gives the discount. Yes, you calculate the cost before you pay the cost. So treasure token does get to cast Ink for 3 mana, even if you have to sack the treasure to do it. Alright, Brushstroke and Wedding Announcement has me kind of interested. The most awkward part of that, I think, is that the white-black decks that this has the easiest time getting discounted in tend to be decks that already have stellar removal and don't need more removal. So maybe that's kind of a unfortunate catch-22 for the card. Because with Vanishing Verse and Rite of Oblivion, you're kind of already swimming in efficient removal, huh? Maybe Rakdos? Maybe, but then you still have to get the enchantments part of it. Meat Hook's kind of hard to play in Rakdos Blood Vamps because you're not getting the treasury ramp aspect then. And it generally is trying to be more of an aggressive deck, so it can't really afford to wipe its own board. But if you're playing it in Alchemy, and you're playing it with Brushstroke, then Assassin's Ink starts to look good. So maybe mono black and black red in Alchemy are interested in Assassin's Ink, but I'm not seeing that in Standard immediately, although we might end up with other enchantments that are interesting in Standard. I mean, you know what? Mono black in Standard with like Blood on the Snow and Meat Hook Massacre, that deck might be interested in Assassin's Ink because it doesn't have access to Rite of Oblivion. And that one actually does have access to a lot of treasures. So, maybe that. Green-black mid-range potentially due to having no access to Rite of Oblivion and Vanishing Verse. Possibly? I don't know whether once you're in green-black, you're just supposed to be playing Binding of the Old Gods instead. But if you don't want to, for whatever reason, then Assassin's Ink could be interesting. I mean, Assassin's Ink is instant speed, so if you're like playing some kind of blue-black deck with counterspells, maybe there's some synergy there that makes that appealing. This is instant speed, so important against Leer, Hullbreaker, and creature lands. Creature lands, I suppose. That's a good point. Leer and Hullbreaker I haven't seen seeing much play in many formats right now, though. Standard, potentially the one with the most play, because you can still play removal spells on their turn with Leer. Hullbreaker, know. I'm not sure what Hullbreaker's spot in the metagame is now. I guess you could try to build an Is-It deck with Hullbreaker Horror right now. I ended up cutting Hullbreaker from all of my blue control decks in Standard because with no Divide by Zero, it's hard to run Leer, and with no Leer, it's hard to run the 1-mana Unsummon, and at that point, it's hard to play enough low-cost spells to play Hullbreaker Horror, and if you're not ramping with Unexpected Windfall, then it's hard to play Horror. So, like, the only shell I think Horror makes sense in right now is Blue-Red Treasures. But I haven't yet found a Blue-Red Treasures build for Horror. Maybe there's like a way you play 4 Unexpected Windfalls and 4 Goldspan Dragons and 2 Hullbreaker Horrors, and maybe that's a viable game plan if you don't want to be one of the lower to the ground dragon lists. Then Hullbreaker has a spot. Maybe? A huge part of Hullbreaker being decent was that Galvanic Iteration made it so easy to have a very huge number of spells, because Galvanic Iteration was just 2 spells to bounce stuff with Horror on its own. And no Epiphany makes it kind of hard to play Galvanic Iteration because you don't have, like, the payoffs to subsidize the times where you have Galvanic and nothing to do with it. That's a weird sentence. Let me try to explain that better. The power level of a card is the percentage of time where it's really good averaged against the percentage of time where it's dead and bad. And sometimes a card is playable because it's just all the middle, where it's never great and never bad, but always reasonable. And sometimes a card is like Galvanic Iteration, where sometimes it's absolutely stellar, and sometimes it does literally nothing because the other cards that combo with it aren't in your hand. And with Epiphany, the percentage of times where Galvanic Iteration is an excellent card were enough to very much outweigh the times where it was bad. The new Equilibrium without Epiphany has felt a lot closer to it might be bad too often to be worth the times where it's good. I like that. That explanation made more sense. What about Kraken, Octopus, Leviathan Tribal with that Vow guy? The trouble there is still that Hullbreaker Horror is not a card that's just automatically good to have in play. It's a card that requires both setup and support. You have to have a lot of cheap instants to back it up, and that's hard to do, especially when so much of the cheap removal in the format just kills Hullbreaker Horror. That, yeah, you can play Hullbreaker Horror on the end of their turn, but if they Vanishing Verse the Horror, who cares? Your Hullbreaker Horror is a 7-mana dead thing. I don't know. Maybe. It seems weird to say that the Divide by Zero nerf hurt Hullbreaker Horror, but I think that really is what happened to it in Standard. Or rather, the Divide by Zero ban in the context of Standard. 7-mana dead thing, so it's a zombie stop end. Unfortunately, Zombies needs most of its card to be undead, not dead. But almost. Biting Palm Ninja, 2 and a black for a 3/3 creature human ninja with ninjutsu 2 and a black. Biting Palm Ninja enters the battlefield with a menace counter on it. Whenever Biting Palm Ninja deals combat damage to a player, you may remove a menace counter from it. When you do, that player reveals their hand and you choose an online card from it, exile that card. Okay. I like this card a lot, actually. Like, a lot, I think. And potentially not even for the ninjutsu. This is just a really powerful card to play on turn 3. Yes, menace counter means that it has menace. That's a callback to the mechanics that they introduced in Ikoria, where stuff could get keyword counters. Yeah, I think I like this card a lot too. It's the stats 3/3 for 3 is pretty solid. I don't think it's really an enabler for ninjutsu, because I find it very unlikely you're ever going to attack with this thing and ninjutsu it away before you remove the menace counter. But, like, regardless of whether you choose to ninjutsu this in to get to super Thoughtseize them on turn 3, or whether you just play it on turn 3 and plan to attack with it next turn, this is a lot of powerful options up and down the curve. It's a Graveyard Trespasser type card, 3 mana, 3/3, great abilities, annoying to deal with. Yeah, and I would say that it's a card that's good against control and random other decks. 3 mana, 3/3 is just a solid stat that doesn't take a ton to be playable. There's a lot of decks that I would just play this over Graveyard Trespasser. Maybe not necessarily against control straight up, because the ward on Trespasser is a pretty big part of why it's good against control, but, like, Menace is a big deal on this card. And actually exiling stuff is kind of radical. I like this a lot. Once you remove the counter, it's nice to reset it, though. Right, but also once you remove the counter, it's easy to get blocked. I'm using the word catch-22 a lot here, but it's kind of awkward that when you want to reset Blighting Palm Ninja is when it's the hardest to reset it, in sense of it's the most likely to get blocked at that point. Yes, if you make copies of Biting Palm Ninja, they get the menace counter because the ability to put a counter on it as it enters the battlefield is part of the text that's being copied. How do you put a menace counter back on it? By, like, bouncing it with an ninjutsu ability and then replaying it again. You can ninjutsu post-combat damage, can't you? That's true. You could, on turn 4... deal damage with Blighting Palm Ninja, resolve the trigger to remove the menace counter, and then ninjutsu something like Thousand-Faced Shadow in after damage is dealt to return the Biting Palm Ninja to your hand. But on curve, I think that's unlikely to be super great, because most of the stuff you could ninjutsu in isn't going to have a meaningful trigger at that point. Like, Thousand-Faced Shadow is the most on-curve thing I could think of, and that then would have to, like, copy the 2-drop that you played and attacked with and didn't have die. Maybe it gets through because they're no longer worried about blocking it. Maybe. But, like, that's implying they don't just have a 4/4 or something that gets to block it for free. Zerasan is still in Standard. Yeah, was that ninjutsu specifically only for rogues, come to think of it? Can attack and then put another in before blockers? No, because you do... Ninjutsu is weird, and the reminder text doesn't really explain this. You can only ninjutsu after the declaration of blockers. A card isn't considered unblocked until after blockers have been declared. It's... The terminology used, it does not intuitively explain it. Zerath is specifically Rogue Jutsu. Bummer. Alright. Well, Biting Palm Ninja is interesting. Black was actually kind of lacking for solid 3-drops that were multi-purpose. So together with Graveyard Trespasser, I think this kind of fills out Black's curve pretty nicely for a lot of different decks that want to be aggressive. I mean, there's a 5/5 for 3 black coming up, so you can swing with this, hit, remove the counter, then ninja in the 5/5 to put this back in your hand. The problem then is, why would you replace your 5/5 with a 3/3 later? Yeah. This is through. Blade of the Oni, 1 and a black. 3/1 artifact creature, equipment demon with menace. Equipped creature has base power and toughness 5/5, has menace, and is a black demon in addition to its other colors and types. Reconfigure to black. Okay, I mean, base case, this is 2 mana, 3/1 menace, which is fine. And in the late game, upgrades other stuff into a 5/5 for 4 mana, which is fine. Still like the 1/4 that makes a treasure on ETB and draws cards. It's the other 3-drop I've been playing in black. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a pretty different role, though, right? That's a very mid-range card, whereas Biting Palm Ninja is a card that isn't necessarily better, but is versatile in the sense that it can play an aggressive game plan a lot better than the 1/4 can. So if you find yourself in a matchup where you have to be the aggressive deck, it can do that. Then if they remove the 5/5, you get your 3/1 back. Yeah, I suppose something that is interesting about the reconfigure cards, especially something like Blade of the Oni that's capable of being aggressive, is the way in which it can play around board wipes. You have the option to say, all right, my turn 4 most efficient play isn't to reconfigure onto my 2/2 and turn it into a 5/5, but it's the play that plays the most around board wipe, because if they do board wipe, I'm still left with a 3/1. So maybe that flexibility makes it interesting in a way that just the generic stats of being a 3/1 menace for 2 wouldn't imply. Also, for the sake of delirium, in formats like Historic, 2-mana 3/1 menace is not a bad attacker, and it puts 2 creature types, or 2 permanent type, 2 card types into the graveyard. Percy, of all people, should know I'm the mid-range guy. We spoke about it for an hour on the podcast. Yeah. I mean, sometimes your mid-range is in the form of a 1/4 that draws cards, and sometimes mid-range is in the form of attacking with on-curve threats every turn. I would say that Biting Palm Ninja is probably... Like, Biting Palm Ninja, you have to be a card that's attacking. Whereas the 3-mana 1/4 is a card that definitely doesn't attack. So both of them are kind of on the opposite. Both of them are sort of mid-range cards, I guess, but Biting Palm Ninja is... What's the right analogy to use here? It's a different... I feel like I'm going to have something. They both technically go to the same mid-range high school, but they're in all different mid-range classes, and they've never really seen each other. So when they get asked if they know one another, they're kind of just embarrassed. 4.5 hours in, you're still on black. We're averaging about 2 hours and 5 to 10 minutes per color, so I'm expecting it's only going to be a 12-hour stream. Now I need to see the mid-range breakfast club. Distracting Chris down tangents is like a donation for extend the stream. The fun part of this is the 10 hours I'm going to spend editing this video, and because I don't have something to upload to YouTube tomorrow, I'm kind of obligated to at least get through editing 2 colors tonight after the stream is done. Oh well. Luckily, making healthy choices was never one of my weaknesses. What if you posted a video that was just the tangents only? Maybe. First step is releasing a video that's only tangents, and then I get to release the video that's all of the non-tangents. I think that might actually take even longer to edit, but the temptation is there. That does sound delightful. Alright, next up. Chain Flail Centipede. 2 and a black, 2/2 artifact creature equipment insect. Whenever Chain Flail Centipede attack or equipped creature attacks, it gets +2/+0 until end of turn. Reconfigure for 2. Seems bad and limited only. Alright, now we just need to keep that up for every other card, and we'll get this done in like 2 hours. The important part of Blade of the Oni is that you will absolutely murder yourself if you try to use a sword like that in real life. I don't know. All you have to hope is that the little spiky bits that apparently prehensile are like on your side and poke the other person and don't aim at you with their presumably own intelligence. It has spikes pointing back at you? Well, kind of. Maybe. But maybe they're smart spikes. Clawing Torment. Single black enchantment aura, enchant artifact or creature. As long as enchanted permanent is a creature, it gets -1/-1. It can't block. Enchanted permanent has at the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life. Huh, okay. Limited only, but interesting. Debt to the Kami. 2 and a black, instant, choose 1. Target opponent exiles a creature they control. Target opponent exiles an enchantment they control. Oh, okay. So black gets another enchantment removal spell. Is this good? I mean, if black is desperate for removal to rest in peace, maybe? Exile is sort of an upgrade. Would Clawing Torment see play in Orzhov War as an historic? I doubt it. Deadweight just seems kind of strictly better. They actively want more --, so that the creature actually dies, so that they can recast their aura with Luris. The can't block is kind of relevant, but if that's your goal, then you also have at 2 mana Heliod's Punishment, which is probably better than Clawing Torment. I mean, I assume Debt to the Kami is totally playable. I just don't know if it's actually good. I mean, well, let's be realistic. When cards like this have seen play, it was because they were just... decks were desperate to have answers to enchantments. If I recall correctly, Farika's Libation pretty much only saw play as a reaction to Wilderness Reclamation. So it's not really a question of whether Debt to the Kami is good. It's a question of, is there something that is so strong that black decks have to play Debt to the Kami as an answer to it? So, yeah, we'll see. But I don't think we've seen Wilderness Reclamation get reprinted yet. But maybe. I can hope. At least until we get through green, nobody spoil my hope. Dockside Chef. Single black, 1/2 enchantment creature, human citizen. 1 and a black, sacrifice an artifact or creature, draw a card. Huh. This actually seems pretty interesting, right? Enchantment and creature types for when Delirium matters. Only 2 mana to turn treasures into cards. This does a lot of things for 1 mana. The only thing it doesn't do is have good stats. Sack decks do play the 3 mana version of this card, but that 3 mana version comes with a treasure and can block because its stats are actually decent. So I'm saying it's a mid-range card. Is that what I'm saying? It certainly seems like it might be beneficial with blood, huh? Black-white is pretty happy to have repeatable Deadly Dispute. Yeah, but black-white, like... when are you playing this card instead of the existing 3 mana version of it? 1/2 for 1 isn't good stats? Not really. What are you doing with a 1/2 for 1? Like, it's good stats for 1 mana, but it's not good stats for 1 card. The chef cooks people? Nah. I think the eyeball is supposed to be a seafood eyeball. I mean, the flavor here is kind of confusing, I guess. Wait, what's going on over here? In this chopstick, is that supposed to be a gear? Oh, that's definitely a gear. Okay, so for some reason we're just throwing gears in our food? Okay, I'm actually kind of concerned about the flavor here. when you need an enchantment. Yeah, so I guess if like you're trying to turn on Assassin's Ink, Dockside Chef helps with that. Oh, is the implication supposed to be the spirits are helping him cook, except they're just throwing in random garbage? Like literally random garbage? The flavor of the soup or the flavor of the card? Yes, precisely. You're definitely never cutting Dispute for Dockside Chef. You might cut the 3-drop. I think those are the spots that are like directly comparable. But yeah, it does seem to me like the enchantment type probably is the kicker that makes the difference, whether you care about that or not. Maybe it's good in a non-green Luris Sack Shell in Historic. Maybe? I don't know that I've seen one of those yet. Because in green you just play the squirrel. Yeah. I mean, you could play this alongside the squirrel, I suppose, and then you have a sack outlet that costs 1 less mana but still supports the squirrel. It can sack itself, which Skullport can't, I suppose, but you don't want to get to the point where you're sacking itself. Although I suppose in response to removal, maybe that's fine. Maybe. Hard to say, but definitely potential. Definitely potential. Dokuchi Shadowwalker. 4 black for a 5/5 creature human ninja with ninjutsu. 3 and a black. Okay, well, that doesn't seem good. Okay. Dokuchi Silencer. 1 and a black for a 2/1 human ninja. Ninjutsu 1 and a black. Whenever Dokuchi Silencer deals combat damage to a player, you may discard a creature card. When you do, destroy target creature or planeswalker that player controls. Huh. Ogre Ninja? Oh, did I say Rat Ninja or something? But yes, Ogre Ninja. Which is an amusing combination of creature types on Shadowwalker. Yeah, discarding a creature isn't the best. What kind of creatures do we have that like getting discarded? We do have still the 3/1 that landfall lets you replay it, right? From the graveyard? That's kind of interesting. Yeah, Ebon Death too, but that's probably not the kind of archetype you're looking for here. Oh, I suppose I should ask for the context of Alchemy and perpetual cost reduction. Ninjutsu is an ability, not an alternate casting cost, correct or incorrect? I think it's an ability. It is an ability. Okay. So if we perpetually reduce the casting cost of something, we cannot ninjutsu it for less. What a shame. I suppose that's why you can't counter a creature that's cast using ninjutsu. That makes sense. But we can perpetually reduce the casting cost of that 3/1 I just talked about, so that you can play it for 1 from the graveyard. That's like not a huge deal, but it's fun. It's a discard ability for Reanimator, I suppose? But is Reanimator really getting into ninjutsu? Like, how does this card actually connect in a Reanimator shell? In fact, because it's an ability, if you have multiple unblocked attackers and only 1 ninjutsu in hand, you can activate it multiple times and bounce your entire board. Huh, I never thought of that before, but yeah, that makes sense. I guess if you're ninjaing in the Silencer, you always have a creature to discard, so you can take out their best creature, assuming you have something they couldn't block. That's true. You are always putting a creature back into your hand. The question is, how do you make discarding a creature meaningful? So I suppose I need to find out the actual name of that 3/1. Scryfall, Advanced Search, Standard, Color Black, Landfall, Graveyard, Skyclave Shade. So, unless they just have something with 4 toughness, they don't want to block Skyclave Shade. You ninjutsu in Silencer, returning Skyclave Shade to your hand. Do 2 damage, discard Skyclave Shade, blow something up. Then, second main, play your landfall trigger and replay Skyclave Shade. I guess that's actually kind of a cute synergy. Stowaway with this seems okay. Yeah, but like, do you want to return Stowaway to your hand, or do you want to do damage with Stowaway? Like, I don't want to not get my Stowaway trigger. Skyclave Shade's a bit costly. Kind of. It's not the most costly. But you also just have the option of not ninjutsuing the Skyclave Shade. You only have to do it if it's going to be a good move. Yeah, you only need 4 mana to do all that, but the end result is that you destroyed their best creature and put a 2/1 into play for 4 mana. So I guess what ends up happening is that you built a Ravenous Chupacabra, and I suppose that's not actually a good card, but maybe the flexibility is worth something? Uncertain. But when you eventually phrase something as, you built a Ravenous Chupacabra, I'm immediately less interested in it, so maybe I'm not very interested anymore. That's true, killing Planeswalkers actually is a big deal. That is actually a big deal. They potentially make blocks that protect their Planeswalkers in the first place. You could potentially get in some really interesting, not necessarily strong, but interesting board state positions where you have some stuff attacking Planeswalkers and some stuff attacking face, and both players have to do some interesting guessing games with regards to whether to play around ninjutsu or whether to try to protect Planeswalkers. That might be fun. In the meantime, I have to sleep to be able to wake up early for the day 2 sign-up window. Good luck in day 2. I suppose I didn't think about that contention when I started the stream. Well, thanks for stopping by, Kiori. And luckily, I'm sure that at some point these will be up on YouTube if you want to rewatch them. And good luck in day 2. Alright, moving on. Enormous Energy Blade. 2 and a black, artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +4/+0. Whenever Enormous Energy Blade becomes attached to a creature, tap that creature, equip 2. Yeah, I guess that's cool. Limited only. What on earth is going on with the art? What? Can I zoom in on this? Oh, not easily, no. What kind of person is that? Is that a gazelle unicorn cheetah? Is that a tail? Cat-like legs? It's a rat. Oh, maybe? With a big pink tail? Oh, okay. So that's something on their back, and the tail is going down here. Okay. I thought this was like a cheetah tail going up. Got it. Okay. Sense has been made. Whoa. Where was I at? Here. Okay. And up here. Right. Okay. Yeah, does not seem constructed playable. Goshintai of Hidden Cruelty. 3 and a black for a 2/2 legendary enchantment creature shrine, Death Touch. At the beginning of your end step, you may pay 1. When you do, destroy target creature with toughness X or less, where X is the number of shrines you control. Seems bad even for shrine decks. Gravelighter. 2 and a black, 2/2 creature spirit, flying. When a Gravelighter enters the battlefield, draw a card if a creature died this turn, otherwise each player sacrifices a creature. Huh. That's a lot of flexibility, I suppose, that you're under control of. And a 3-mana 2/2 flyer is not a terrible creature to get as a result. Playcrafter with upside? Not entirely. Because there are times where you want to play Plaguecrafter post-combat after they have to chump block with a smaller creature. And yeah, Plaguecrafter hitting Planeswalkers is a pretty big deal. This does not do that. That's true. If they kill something in response to the Gravelighter ability, then all you do is draw a card. But, I mean, you drawing a card isn't bad. Very relevant that it doesn't say a creature you control. Very relevant that it doesn't say a creature you control. Oh, in terms of if a creature you control died this turn. It just says any creature, yes. So if your opponent's creatures died, you draw a card instead of sacking something. Draw a card isn't bad, no. So it cantrips if they trade on turn 3, yeah. In Limited, I think that's all stellar. In Constructed, I'm not sure if that's strong enough to be worth taking up a very valuable 3-drop slot in your deck. Card stellar in Commander? Is it? I mean, I guess if you're like looping it or something. But like, each player sacrifices a creature isn't exactly a rare effect, right? You can loop it with some commanders. I mean, I guess you can... Well, what's the point of looping it? Just that for 6 mana you get to make everybody sack something and then draw a card? That doesn't seem super great. Is there a combo where you loop it from the graveyard? So, not really, right? Because anything after the first one is guaranteed to only draw cards. So you could play it once, and then if you somehow replay it, it's still just a 2/2 flyer that draws a card. And I'm not going to knock a 2/2 flyer that draws a card. I just, like... Would you play a 3-mana 2/2 flyer that just 100% of the time drew a card? Is that Constructed playable? I don't think that's Constructed playable, right? And it's flexibility in a sense that I think it's hard for you to control. Yeah, I definitely think Gravelighter is fantastic in Limited, but I'm just probably already excited about a 2/2 flyer for 3 in Limited, and that it doesn't take much more than that to get me interested. Teleportation Circle. Okay, yeah, so if you're, like, playing token makers and you just blink Gravelighter every turn, yeah, maybe. I don't know. My innate reaction is Gravelighter doesn't seem stellar, but effects like this have seen play in the past, usually in decks that like had engines to support them. Maybe that could theoretically exist, but I would also say there's a lot of decks right now that play a lot of cheap creatures as sacrifice fodder, and Gravelighter seems kind of super garbage against that. Yeah. Edict effects are good when they're big hexproof threats. So, maybe? Even then, I would feel worried that Gravelighter actually winds up being worse than the other versions of these edict effects in that case, because anytime they kill Gravelighter in response to the trigger, they protect their hexproof threat, and you don't want to draw a card in that position, you want to kill the hexproof threat, right? What happens if you sack Gravelighter in response to the trigger? You draw a card. Because if you sack Gravelighter and exile it by sacking it, instead of graveyard sacking it, then you would still get the sacrifice. But that's kind of hard to do, unless you have like a Rest in Peace in play, I suppose. There's no indestructible aggro threat at the moment. Not really. There's Imrith, it's pseudo hexproof. And I suppose there's a bunch of random threats with ward on curve that maybe Gravelighter you're okay with playing after your opponent plays a Graveyard Trespasser, possibly, but that's not really trading up on any kind of resource. Unless you're sacking a 1-drop, I suppose. But yeah, I don't know if that sounds exciting to me. It just sounds like, yeah, maybe it's something. And honestly, is that actually better than playing Debt to the Kami, which exiles and has some flexibility to it? Yeah, I don't know. There's a new indestructible aggro threat. Literally. Okay, that's fair. Well, we haven't gotten there yet, but if that's the case, I think I still... Like, Debt to the Kami sounds more interesting than Gravelighter to me at the moment. Avabra Caretaker? True, although that doesn't see a ton of play. And also, Avabra Caretaker is a card that's only threatening if they have a board, and if they have a board, then Gravelighter isn't doing anything. So the only time Gravelighter's ever killing Caretaker is in a situation where Caretaker wasn't actually good. Hidetsugu Devouring Chaos. 3 and a black for a 4/4 legendary creature Ogre Demon. Single black, sacrifice a creature, scry 2. 2 and a red, tap, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. When you exile a non-land card this way, Hidetsugu Devouring Chaos deals damage equal to the exiled card's mana value to any target. Okay, so... Black and sacrifice a creature, scry 2. Then you get to look at the top 2 to activate the next ability, which is 2 and a red, tap, exile the top card of your library. Immediately, regardless of whether you play that turn for card advantage or not, smack something equal to its mana value. Will this be up on YouTube? Yes, it will be over the next probably like 2 days. But we haven't done the multicolored stuff yet. We've only done white and blue. Seems pretty sick and limited. Yes, this card seems like the sort of thing that must be answered in limited or it will just win the game completely. Seems like a fun commander card. Yeah, could be. I actually think this might have potential in standard. The effect being instant speed is sort of good, except that you don't really want to instant speed it, except maybe during combat, because if you hit a sorcery, which most cards are probably going to be sorceries, you want to be able to cast it, right, to get the card advantage. Although, I suppose you're already down 3 mana, so how often are you playing the card? Okay, so let's say turn 6, you activate the ability. In order to get the card and the damage, you need to, like, hit a 3-drop. So it's not Bob, right? Because you don't actually draw the card. You can't hit a 5-drop and just put a 5-drop in your hand. You have to have enough mana to cast the 5-drop that turn. And that's actually sort of restrictive. This thing's really mana hungry. You could get through the beginning by just like, okay, you get to a point where you activate Hidetsugu, you hit a 5-drop, sad, you're not getting card advantage, but you are throwing 5 damage at a creature or at their face or at a planeswalker, and that's like probably makes you not cry too hard about not getting your card advantage. But, I don't know. Is this better than the 1/3 red wizard that exiles the top card? What card is that? That doesn't sound familiar. as the top end of a Rakdos aggro deck, this, I guess, Anj kind of is what I would think of in this spot. And at least in the Rakdos aggro decks I've played, I think I like Anj more than this. Is it better than Immerstrom? I think like everything's better than Immerstrom, right? But I'm also of the opinion Immerstrom kind of sucks as a card and I don't understand why anybody plays it. So I'm not the one to ask about that. Any target is flexible. A lot of burn damage to face if you need that, and it's a lot of burn damage at creatures if you're trying to win a card advantage war. Voltaic Visionary. I think Voltaic Visionary is a pretty different card. I don't think those are really doing the same thing at all. Hidetsugu is kind of more of a long-term card advantage card, and Voltaic Visionary is trying to do like weird acceleration stuff that's hard to set up. I don't really get it necessarily. It fills niche roles like Graveyard Exile, Flying, and Indestructible. Not that it's good, but it's more necessary. I don't know, because like I've yet to see any deck playing Immersturm Predator where I thought that it made sense to play that over Anj, but I'm also of the opinion that black-red decks shouldn't try to be mid-rangey and should just try to close out games. But like, I guess here's my problem. I think Immersturm Predator is bad at absolutely everything except being Scavenging Ooze, and I don't think there are a lot of formats where a 4-mana Scavenging Ooze is good. So anytime you're trying to do anything other than Scavenging Ooze, I think Immersturm Predator is the wrong card to play. And that's most formats. In Alchemy and Standard, you don't really care about Scavenging Ooze. Sometimes I see an Immersturm on the other side of the table and say, oh, I'm dead. Well, I suppose my question then is, why aren't you playing removal for Immersturm Predator? Being a person who has historically played a bunch of Divide by Zeros and Fading Hopes and just gone, oh yeah, Immersturm Predator, who cares? That doesn't do anything. Immersturm Predator is mostly interested in Goldspan Mirrors. I guess, is that supposed to be the idea? You like have your Immersturm Predator and then block Goldspan? Except, well, I guess Divide by Zero is gone now, but yeah. Am I not just supposed to attack with my Goldspan Dragon and then Dragonfire the Immersturm Predator? Maybe. Immersturm Predator is pretty great with haste or things like that, but yeah, I don't know. It also requires you to be playing a deck where you have sacrifice fodder. Anyway, long story short, I don't think Hidetsugu is filling any of the same roles as Immersturm Predator, even if it looks like the same mana cost. They occupy the same spot on the curve, but I imagine they fill pretty different purposes. Hidetsugu seems like the kind of card that I would want if I was trying to just go bigger in a mid-range style, probably. I don't think Hidetsugu is like a control card, but I do think that it's a card that you would board into if you want to become more of the controlling deck in a matchup post-board, maybe? But he also tries to turn all of his control X into combo control or tempo or midrange. I like control midrange, like the Alchemy Rakdos deck that Jim Davis played. So there have been some Rakdos decks that like try to play Igneous, whatever that 3-mana lightning bolt that learns is, and then the 2-mana 2/2 that casts cards from the graveyard, and then it plays against your go blanks. And that archetype did get Biting Palm Ninja, which sort of works. Ninjutsuing back the Vampire 2-drop, I guess, is kind of interesting. And, like, you could do that. But I don't know that that deck needs Hidetsugu either, necessarily. Yeah, I don't know. Hidetsugu probably too slow for those lists that already have enough card advantage. I don't think this is getting anywhere, but I like the idea. I want this to see play, but I'm not seeing a spot for it immediately. Maybe put a 10-drop in top in and just kill them with mana damage. There's not a lot of easy access to that effect, I don't think. But maybe if we get, like... Depending on how many playable channel cards there is the ability to just stock your deck with expensive cards like Mirror Shell Crab that actually cost 3 mana but ping your opponent for 7 with Hidetsugu. Again, probably not actually a good idea, but that is technically a way the card could function. Alright, Inkrise Infiltrator. 1 and a black for a 1/2 creature human ninja with flying. 3 and a black, Infiltrator gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Limited only, moving on. Not ideal because you can't channel off Hidetsugu. No, but at that point, once you're hitting like the 7 damage point, I don't think Hidetsugu needs to actually get the card advantage element. You're just paying 3 mana to deal 7 damage or something is probably acceptable. And then they're just not dead when you draw your 7 drops. I mean, I'm kind of envisioning Hidetsugu as, if you want the ability to be card advantage, you're probably looking for 3 drops. 3 drops seems like the reasonable spot on the curve where you can do something meaningfully card advantage with 3 damage, probably pick off a creature, and then cast the 3 drop. Flip commit to memory to 10 the opponent and then commit their best creature. Alright. Alright, split cards. Well, maybe you've got me there. I might be interested in that. What split cards do we have that do a bunch of damage but are really cheap for one mode? I mean, admittedly, you're at the point where you're still paying 7 mana to commit something and do 10 to your opponent. Spring to mind. Yeah, alright, so we can spend 6 mana to deal 9 damage to something and cast a Rampant Growth. Cut to Ribbons. Cut to Ribbons is 4 damage to something and then we cut. It's not awful for 5 mana. The Golgari one. So we can do 5 mana to do 8 damage to something and then cast Find to return 2 creatures to our hand. Find isn't really making an impact on the board, though. Carnival Carnage. Okay, 5 damage to something, and then 1 damage to a creature and 1 damage to the opponent's face for 4 mana? That's kind of reasonable, other than that you have to put Carnival Carnage in your deck. That part's not great. There's Leave to Chance, but that card doesn't really have either mode be useful. We don't need to cast it right, just a bunch of damage is plenty. Split just makes them castable outside of Hidetsugu. Yeah, we don't need to cast them, which is why, like, I think you're not super upset if Hidetsugu hits like a 5 or a 6 drop and just does a bunch of damage to something. I'm just trying to figure out what, like, the optimal point is to build around Hidetsugu in terms of what kind of CMC is a meaningful amount of damage that kills something and gets you a card. Rags to Riches is 11. Alright. Alright. Yeah, flipping Commit to Memory and hitting 10 damage is fine. That's true. It's Calibrated Blast. I've never seen this card before, so I don't think so. Opus is a 2-mana treasure token, but you can't activate the ability of Opus off of Hidetsugu. So it's not dead if you draw it, but you're not cheating a giant bunch of damage and getting a card draw. Bedeck Bedazzle is 8 and cast for 2. That's true, we can Bedeck. Which half is Bedeck? +3, -3? Okay. Bedeck Bedazzle is actually kind of interesting. Come to think of it, is Bedeck actually a good card in Historic? I don't know if Bedazzle is great, but Bedeck kills a lot of stuff through Indestructible. Claim to Fame is kind of interesting. You hit for 3 and cast for 1. That's fine. Revival Revenge is the same cost and reanimates a cheap creature. Yeah. I think I'm actually like sort of interested in the idea of running a bunch of Bedecks as removal spells, because those aren't actually embarrassing in the context of Historic, to just 2 mana give something -3, -3. Take care, Hogbogs. Thanks for stopping by. Alright, we gotta not get tied up with Hirutsugu or we'll be here all day. Discovery Dispersal has been the most playable of the random spells that I've seen. The other one, I guess, being I've liked... What was that 3 mana thing? There's some blue card that's 3 mana, counter something unless they pay 3, and then 3 of their lands don't untapped is the other half from the graveyard. But Discovery Dispersal with Hirutsugu is kind of interesting. Alright, Invoke Despair. 1 black, 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 black. 5 mana total. Sorcery. Target opponent sacrifices a creature. If they can't, they lose 2 life and you draw a card, then repeat this process for an enchantment and a planeswalker. Huh. Okay. So they must sacrifice a creature. If they have no creatures, they lose 2 life and you draw a card. Then they must sack an enchantment. If they don't have an enchantment, they lose 2 life and you draw a card. Then they must sacrifice a planeswalker. If they can't, they lose 2 life and you draw a card. That seems actually good? Like, if this is 5 mana, they sacrifice a creature, you draw 2 cards, and they lose 4 life. Is that a good 5-drop? So, like, say your opponent plays Sorin. If your response is, I invoke Despair, kill your Sorin token, kill your Sorin, I draw a card, and you lose 2 life? That's, like, actually good, right? How about hitting this with Velomachus in the Velo Invoke Justice deck? I don't think you could play this in Velomachus, because the quadruple black is, like, unplayable. If you care about killing a creature, it's too slow. Well, I mean, it depends on what kind of creature you're killing, I guess. Control could counter it, but only if they can actually hold up a counter spell. And at least in the context of Standard right now, Control kind of has to tap out for 4 and 5-drop stuff. I guess the question is playing Invoke Despair ever better than playing Lolth? Which is sort of the direct competing spot here. Yeah, if they have nothing, this is deal 6, draw 3, which does make this play an interesting role as a burn spell finisher occasionally. That's true, we can't Galvanic Iteration Invoke Despair. Is that the dream? How easy is it to Unexpected Windfall into this? You get treasures to fix your black mana. 5. Okay, so on turn 5, after Unexpected Windfall, you can Galvanic Invoke Despair. Opponent loses 12, you draw 6? Maybe? Is that good? I don't know. I find myself sort of tempted by that. Okay, so to be realistic, the power level of Invoke Despair is pretty much directly proportional to whether the decks that exist in the format have stuff you're actually excited to kill. So the play pattern of a lot of decks is to play like one big Planeswalker or one big creature, then I think Invoke Despair in response has a lot of potential to be very good. Invoke Despair seems very similar to Blood on the Snow, except it's good against one thing instead of a bunch of things. In terms of, I'm going to kill your stuff and then get an advantage. The flaw with that being that Invoke Despair produces advantage in hand that you then have to cast, whereas Go Blank produces advantage to the board, so you're actually getting like a development advantage off of it. So I'm going to go with Invoke Despair still doesn't seem good, but it seems cool, and I'm going to be disappointed if I don't wind up putting it in a deck. And playing Unexpected Windfall, Galvanic Iteration, Invoke Despair seems like something I'm going to make myself do at some point. Probably. If you're pulling Galvanic shenanigans, you're just going to be using the red Invoke. Okay, well, we haven't got there yet. Maybe that is more appealing. If you're getting Planeswalker / Meat Hook or Wedding Announcement or some other odd mid-range control style enchantment, it's going to be a big swing. Yeah, I guess. Maybe that's actually bad, because like I think hitting Meat Hook or Wedding Announcement is actually pretty disappointing. In terms of they already got the benefit out of that enchantment, and the thing you're removing isn't a huge deal. Like, I think I don't want to hit an enchantment. I think I want to draw a card with the enchantment half of this. If this makes your opponent sacrifice 3 permanents, I mean, sacrificing a Planeswalker is pretty good, but if this like makes them sacrifice a Wedding Announcement token and the Wedding Announcement, I think it's bad. Like, that's barely 1 permanent worth of sacrifice, and they paid 3 mana and you paid 5. In fact, that's less than 1 permanent worth of sacrifice because they presumably got 1 or 2 other triggers out of the Wedding Announcement in addition to the stuff you just made them sacrifice. And that stuff was already on the board. Yeah, and if White-Black is the most popular deck, at least for the time being, that doesn't make Invoke Despair seem good, does it? Alright. I'm disappointing myself, so I'm going to move on to the next card so I don't have to keep talking myself down on Invoke Despair. Because I don't want to. Junji the Midnight Sky. 3 black for a 5/5 legendary creature dragon spirit with flying and menace. When Junji the Midnight Sky dies, choose 1. Each opponent discards 2 cards and loses 2 life, or put target non-dragon creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control, you lose 2 life. So much of the dragons is hard to evaluate specifically because so much removal right now is exile based. It's very difficult for me to see Junji in a Vanishing Verse Disdainful Stroke world. And if this was to be a sideboard card, what would it be profitable against sideboarding into? This doesn't, like, destroy creature decks. And if it doesn't destroy exile-based removal mid-range decks, I'm not seeing a home for it. Like, I think there might be space for these dragons if their objective is to just completely shut down aggressive decks, but the ability on this does not seem like something that's relevant against aggressive decks. I don't think this is good as an aggressive deck's top end because it kind of just is too slow to be an aggressive deck. Tiamat dragon decks. Yeah, I suppose if you're just desperate to find more dragons, this does fill that role. That's true. Blood on the Snow with this is crazy IMO. You get 2 creatures back and they lose their board. I guess if you curve Junji into Blood on the Snow, but like, why are you playing Junji instead of a Planeswalker? Like, I guess the question for every black 5-drop is, what is this doing that Lolth isn't? And I don't see this doing anything that Lolth isn't. If this was an ETB, I'd be kind of singing a different song, but yeah, I don't know. Not with it being a dies trigger, I don't think. Kaito's Pursuit. 2 and a black for a sorcery. Target player discards 2 cards. Ninjas and rogues you control gain menace until end of turn. Seems bad. Is there a way to get multiple mind rots in one turn? Off of Junji or off of Kaito's Pursuit? Presumably off of Junji. If you mean, like, can you mind rot them and then sack Junji? Like, I guess. But if you're in a matchup where you want mind rots and that's what you're caring about, I imagine you probably care more about Go Blank. Junji can pull from the opponent's graveyard as well. That might be relevant if your stuff got exiled. Yeah, it is nice that Junji can steal big stuff from their graveyard, although it's hard to reliably have that matter from a deck building perspective. From a deck building perspective, it's cool if that comes up, but your game plan has to center around what you're reanimating from your graveyard, because that's what you actually are guaranteed to have exist. Although, can we talk about this art? I do love the little, like, cherry blossoms on the big, scary dragon. Like, that's cute. I dig it. We need more pink stuff in, like, all cards, but actually, Invoke Despair also got a lot of radical pink going on. I'm digging this. Do you think it's better than the original Kokusho? Probably not. The original Kokusho was like combo decks of, I'm going to sack this thing 4 times and everybody's going to lose 20. I mean, in the context of Commander, I guess these dragons have an entirely different role, which is like making every opponent mind rot is sort of cool in Commander, but Commander is like such a completely different format to evaluate to standard Alchemy and Historic that, I don't know. Pink and neon go together. I guess that's true. Oh, actually, do they? What are the common colors for neon lights? I know pink goes with Vaporwave, but does it go with actual neon? What controls what color neon is? Neon lighting consists of brightly glowing electrified glass tubes or bulbs that contain rarefied neon or other gases. Neon lights are a type of cold cathode gas discharge light. A neon tube in a sealed glass tube is a sealed glass tube with a metal electrode at each end filled with one of a number of gases at low pressure. A high potential of several thousand volts is applied to the electrode. Ionizes the gases in the tube, causing it to emit a colored light. The color of the light depends on the gas in the tube. Neon lights were named for neon, a noble gas which gives off a popular orange light, but other gases and chemicals are used to produce other colors such as hydrogen, red, helium, yellow, carbon dioxide, white, and mercury blue. Neon tubes can be fabricated in curving artistic shapes to form letters or pictures. They are mainly used to make dramatic multicolored glowing signage for advertising called neon signs, which were popular from the 1920s to 1960s and again in the 1980s. Pretty much super saturated colors can all be used for neon. Okay, so you could get super saturated pink. Cyber pink. I'm delighted at the idea that the name of that color is cyberpink. Oh, no, no. If you see cyberpunk, pink is common. Okay, I don't care. We're calling it cyberpink from now on. That's the name of the color. Too bad. I'm not going to live in a world where that is not the name of a color. I have built up my own expectations and I refuse to disappoint myself. Moving on to Kami of Restless Shadows. 4 and a black for a 3/3 creature spirit. When Kami of Restless Shadow enters the battlefield, choose 1. Return up to 1 target ninja or rogue creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Put target creature card from your graveyard on top of your library. That seems exclusively limited. Helium apparently glows pink, which means we will soon not be able to have pink neon. Is there a shortage of helium? I was not aware of that. Interesting. Or at least I assume that's the implication going on there. Relatively soon. Huh. Alright. What do we use helium for then? What's that going to impact? Aside from, I guess, balloons. If only all those kids hadn't inhaled all that helium, maybe then we wouldn't have a shortage. Dang kids, everything's their fault. Several industries need it. Really? Alright. Google, my friend. Industrial uses of helium. Helium is used as a cooling medium for the Large Hadron Collider and the superconducting magnets in MRI scanners and NMR spectrometers. It's also used to keep satellite instruments cool and was used to cool the liquid oxygen and hydrogen that powered the Apollo space vehicles. Oh. So basically just all kinds of usage as a coolant. Because of its low density, helium is used to fill in decorative balloons, blah, 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 blah. That's boring. Because it is very unreactive, helium is used to provide an inert protective atmosphere for making fiber optics and semiconductors, and for arc welding. Helium is also used to detect leaks, such as in-car air conditioning systems, and because it diffuses quickly, it is used to inflate car airbags after impact. A mixture of 80% helium and 20% oxygen is used as an artificial atmosphere for deep sea divers and other working under pressurized conditions. Helium neon gas lasers are used to scan barcodes in supermarket checkouts. A new use for helium is on helium ion microscope that gives better image resolution than a scanning electron microscope. Huh. Interesting. Oh, hey, I am Rosie. Thanks for the raid. You join us getting distracted from a set review and looking up the industrial uses of helium. We were getting distracted about what color neon lights get made and discovered that helium makes pink neon lights, like the pretty pink in all these colors. And then apparently there's going to be a helium shortage too soon. Yeah, we're trying not to get distracted while doing the set review because this is probably going to take like 12 hours, and as you can see, we're doing an excellent job at it. Thought there's always a helium shortage. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe. It's the first I'm hearing of it, at least. DTG93, thanks for the follow. Glad you're enjoying the stream. I try to get balloons and they say no. Well, maybe we're going through one now, and maybe balloons were the first thing to go. Because apparently helium's actually used in the manufacturing of a lot of different semiconductors and in, like, big space tech cooling systems. It's interesting. The best way to learn something is to wander off on a tangent. Completely agreed. I don't think I'd change it. I complain about these set reviews taking 12 hours, but I love doing them regardless. Are we reviewing for draft or constructed? We were reviewing for standard, alchemy, and historic, because those are the formats I actually feel qualified to talk about right now. Most other formats I'm not super up-to-date on. I mean, I suppose I'm up-to-date on draft as much as anybody in the context of a new draft environment, but Every time I try to talk about cards in a draft context, I wind up talking for an additional 6 hours, and I'm not interested in doing an 18-hour set review today. Maybe a different time. Kami of Terrible Secrets. 3 and a black for a 3/4 creature spirit, and Kami of Terrible Secrets enters the battlefield. If you control an artifact and an enchantment, you draw a card and you gain 1 life. Limited only. Leech Gauntlet. 1 and a black, 2/2 artifact creature, equipment Leech. Lifelink. Equipped creature has lifelink, reconfigure 4. Seems kind of limited only, although I guess you could potentially board it in against a burn deck or something if you just want to board into a lifelinker that potentially gives a bigger creature lifelink, but that seems like an inefficient way to go about it. I don't like the implication creature type Leech. Does that mean that this is like a actual physical leech that somebody turned into a glove? Is that supposed to be... Is that supposed to be the implication? That sounds just like the worst possible thing. By the way, Chris, so we can obtain more helium from natural gases. There's a lot of it in the ground, and we can recapture out of the air. We're running out of our reserved helium because there's so much. Because there's so much as in there's so much use? And come to think of it, where does that mean our reserved helium comes from? Is it just stuff we mined over the long run? There's so much reserved, we're burning through it intentionally. Aww. Okay, you'll have to elaborate on what that means to me. I'm interested. What makes a card good in Alchemy, I suppose, in contrast to a good standard card? So in the context of what decks people play, there's different metagame to both formats. Like, in the context of standard, there's a lot of mid-range white-black stuff going on, and Alchemy has a little more access to heavy mid-range effects because of the existence of Key to the Archive and Discover the Formula, providing a different top end to control. But also, Alchemy has the nerfs to Leer and Divide by Zero up, whereas Standard has bans on Divide by Zero, which means Standard has fully powered Leer that can play on the opponent's turn, but doesn't have Divide by Zero. That's the best card to play with Leer, but you can play Leer with removal spells on the opponent's turn, which you can't do in Alchemy. And also, Standard doesn't have Epiphany, but Alchemy does. So it's weird that Alchemy and Standard have kind of rapidly become extremely different formats, despite having almost the same card pool. It's more money to keep reserving a lot space-wise and stuff versus getting more out of the natural gases as we need. As in, like, the storage costs on the helium we do have is expensive? Is that what you mean? Okay. I guess I can understand that. Although that raises curious questions about why we wound up reserving so much in the first place. Or storing so much, I suppose. Anyway, I hate Leech Gauntlet. Let's stop looking at it. Lethal Exploit. 1 and a black instant. Target creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn. It gets an additional -1/-1 until end of turn for each modified creature you controlled as you cast this spell. That's some wild text, but okay. Seems like a bad removal spell. That does not do enough for 2 mana. Retrieve Socks. Alright, we can do this. Storing helium is really hard. It wants to go through any container you put it in. Oh, right. That's why they use helium to detect leaks in, like, super airtight containers, because air will travel through gaps very slowly, but helium will go through gaps really quickly and in larger volumes because it can fit through smaller gaps than air can. So that would make sense. It's very difficult to store helium because it has to be not just an airtight container, but a, like, hyper airtight container. Right. I think I remember watching a YouTube video about a, like, vacuum chamber that they had to go through, like, a 10-hour process to double check every gap with helium in order to make sure that the vacuum chamber was maximum vacuum. Helium is perfectly happy to go through containers with no gaps too. Oh no. Can it actually just, under enough pressure, travel through, like, solid matter? Huh. Interesting. Anyway, let's go grab that cat. Would you believe that it's kind of difficult to find a cat who is almost entirely dark gray towards black and whose favorite sleeping positions at night when all the lights are off are all black blankets? Is that why old balloons stop floating? Oh, so the helium eventually just leaks out of them. Interesting. There's this statistical possibility that if you were to slam your hand on a table, it could just pass through. And presumably, individual helium particles have a much higher probability of that happening, huh? Neat. Sock's passive? Oh, I don't know. He seems pretty aggressive at the moment. Time to get white blankets? I should. I got a white blanket on my bed that he's a lot easier to spot when he's on that. You let your cat lick you? I hate how that feels. Oh, it's not that bad. It's a little coarse, but I don't know. It's scratchy. In a nice way. Cats shed hair to attack the white blanket plan. Oh, I've given up on having any surface without cat hair on it. Makes your skin crawl? I mean, I suppose that's part of the point, right? It's supposed to grip to get dirt off better. Or in the case of at least cats licking my skin, I'm assuming it's sort of similar to horses in that they're doing it to get your sweat because they're trying to get more salt into their diet. And yet, cat hair inevitably finds some way to get to your nose with such great efficiency. Maybe I need to get him to lick my nose to get it off there. Alright, moving on. Where were we? Life of Toshiro Umezawa, 1 in the black. Choose 1. Target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn. You gain 1 life. That's a cool reference to GT. Third mode. Exile this saga, then return to the battlefield transformed under your control. Memory of Toshiro. 2 and a 3. Enchantment creature human samurai. Tap, pay 1 life, add black. Spend this mana only to cast an instant or sorcery spell. Huh. That wasn't where I thought this was going. Interesting. I think how playable this is depends entirely on how useful -1/-1 to a creature is, if I had to guess. Because, like, I want to get to the point where I can use this 2/3 as a mana rock, but I then have to build an instance and sorcery-based deck, which is kind of hard in the context of Standard, which is the only format I think is slow enough for this card to have hope in, because most of the payoffs in Standard that tend to be more expensive are, like, permanents right now, creatures and planeswalkers. And there's not a huge amount of matchups where you can get value out of -1/-1, and then gaining 2 life isn't a big deal. I think this is nothing, which is disappointing, because the flavor on it is kind of radical. But yeah, not great. I guess there's Invoke Despair, yeah, but I don't think this is the way I want to be getting to Invoke Despair. If you play this on curve, you get your ramp turn 5. Okay, so turn 2, turn 3, turn 4, and then yeah, on turn 5 you get Memory of Toshiro to cast Invoke Despair, which was already on curve. I guess it fixes for black, but it's not exciting, is it? Not exciting. Next up, Long Reach of Night. 3 in a black for a saga. First chapter, each opponent sacrifices a creature unless they discard a card. Second chapter, each opponent sacrifices a creature unless they discard a card. Third, exile the saga, return it as an 0/4 with Menace that whenever it attacks, it gets +X power until the end of turn, where X is the number of creature cards in defending player's graveyard. So again, this seems kind of awful, but flicker effects? Maybe. GT no longer even good enough for Standard. Well, GT that you can activate 4 times in a turn is a lot stronger than a GT you can activate 1 time at a turn. It doesn't really fix because you need a black to cast it. Well, it fixes in the sense that it's trying to fix for quadruple black. But yeah, it does not fix your first black source, definitely. I don't think Long Reach of Night is good, but I do love the idea of making my opponent discard 2 and then blinking this and making them discard 2 again. But that's a long way to go to get a second Mind Rot that's probably worse than Mind Rot. Malicious Malfunction. 1 black sorcery. All creatures get -2/-2 until end of turn. If a creature would die this turn, exile it instead. Well... They don't have to discard if they have 0 creatures? Oh! You're right. That's not each opponent sacrifices a creature, and then... Yeah, okay, never mind. Long Reach of Night super sucks. Bummer. So Malicious Malfunction is worse than the old version of this we had that exiles creatures and also exiles all creatures that entered the battlefield on that turn, which, I mean, makes it not as bad as cards that are better than it, or not as good as cards that are better than it. It could possibly still be useful in Standard, I guess. Potentially interesting against decks that play... what's his face? Edgar? If it sounds like I keep saying... If it sounds like I keep describing every card by whether or not it's good against Edgar, that probably says something about how annoyed I am at how hard it is to beat Edgar, doesn't it? Sideboard card? Yeah, I think so. No deck jumps to mind that I'd want Malicious Malfunction against right now, but it's an interesting card to have access to in case just the right deck arises. Don't see this seeing much play over Meathook. I mean, it's entirely based on how important Exile is, right? We'll see. March of Wretched Sorrow. X and a black. Instant. As an additional cost to cast this spell, you may exile any number of black cards from your hand. This spell costs 2 less to cast for each card exiled this way. March of Wretched Sorrow deals X damage to target creature or planeswalker, and you gain X life. I guess this is better than the white one, probably. It's still not really answering anything on curve, but at least the stuff that's not on curve, you're gaining life, and you have a reason to care about overpaying. I think this might be the first March that I've liked aside from the blue one, which is, I guess, to say actually that I just don't like the white one, come to think of it, since this is the third one we're reviewing. Yeah, so wasn't there another card like March that was available before that like gave a creature -X and you gained life? Or am I going crazy? Erebos' Intervention? Yeah, and that also had the ability to exile Graveyard? But it didn't really get played? That doesn't bode well for March of Wretched Sorrow, does it? Is there a Reanimator or other deck that cares about loading up the yard? In regards to what? March? Because you can't discard cards to March. You have to exile them. So it's not a discard outlet, unfortunately. This does shoot Planeswalkers. That's true. Erebos didn't do that. Maybe that gets it closer? I want to believe in March of Wretched Sorrow, but it has to do entirely with the speed of the format. And I suspect it's probably too slow to be good. Erebos' Intervention is in the Arena Cube. And how highly does it get picked there? It has seen play. In order for that to be true, you need to be convinced that somebody put Intervention in their deck after registration. Just being picked, not good enough. But I suppose in that sense, every common card in every draft environment ever has technically seen play. Erebos' Intervention saw some minor play in the post-Omnom ban 80-card blue-black control deck. Yeah, alright, that's technically true. I suppose March then could see play against, like, some red-green aggro lists where you pay 4 mana to kill a Halana Nolena and gain 3 life and, like, pretend that's good. Maybe? It is also interesting that, unlike the other Marches where there came a point where reducing the mana cost didn't serve a purpose, March does mean you essentially... You don't need to deal 3 damage to a 3 toughness creature. You could deal 5 or 6 damage, which does mean that you can discard any number of... exile any number of black cards to March to gain 2 life. Maybe that functionality is actually useful if you've drawn a bunch of cards? Like, is there a time after... Is there a way to play enough card draw spells that you get to the point where you're like, okay, I'm going to spend 1 mana to March of Wretched Sorrow and exile 3 cards from my hand to gain 6 life and kill a creature? In that sense, this might be the first one of this cycle that the exile ability actually seems really interesting to me. Alright. Alright. I'm not going to say that I'm, like, drawn to throw this in decks, but I do think this is actually kind of interesting and might have potential. Next up, Mukotai Ambusher. 3 and a black for a 3/2 artifact creature rat ninja with ninjutsu 1 and a black, lifelink. Limited only! Yay! Having some Mandela effect with ninjutsu, I distinctly remember it as ninjitsu. So what would the difference with that be? Jutsu means like art, right? Or something like that? Whereas jitsu is... I don't know exactly what that means, but like... Isn't there some martial art that ends in jitsu? Oh. Is it taijutsu? No. Oh. I don't know. Anyway. It is ninjutsu. Yes. Alright, let's do some Googling then. Jitsu. What's jitsu? Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. That's the one I'm thinking of. What was it named after? Oh, is it literally just a translation thing? Because the Japanese name is still Jujutsu? It's just the Portuguese name is Jitsu? So is that just an issue of popularized translation differences? Huh. Interesting. This is probably less of how it is spelled in English thing. Because if I translate Gim into Kim or Bak into Park, or Yi into Lee for Korean to English. Yeah, that might be the case. I mean, I guess if the... Developed in the 1920s by Brazilian brothers. Was taught judo. Yeah, it doesn't really say on Wikipedia very easily. Or at least very straightforward. It is definitely a romanization / translation thing. I'm curious if the translation difference happened at the point where it was translated from Japanese to Brazilian, or if it happened at the point where it was translated from Brazilian to English. And it looks like it might be at the point where it was translated from Japanese to Brazilian. Wait, does Wikipedia say it's ninjutsu? Do I know a lot about languages? No, but I like to learn more things all the time. I know a very, very small amount about some languages, mostly English. No, it is ninjutsu. Okay. I speak like somebody who's interested in linguistics, but my actual knowledge of linguistics is pretty limited. I can like read some hiragana and katakana, but that's about the extent of my knowledge of other languages. Alright. Mokutai Soul Ripper. 1 in a black, 4/3 artifact vehicle. Whenever Mukotai Soul Ripper attacks, you may sacrifice another artifact or creature. If you do, put a +1/+1 counter on Mukotai Soul Ripper, and it gains menace until end of turn. Well, I mean, I guess it's a 2-mana 4/3, right? And everything else is just gravy? Alright, let's get this cat hair off the face. There's this delightful little, what's the right way to describe it? Inconvenience? No. I don't want to say catch-22 for like the 7th time tonight, but there's this interesting little catch-22 when it comes to streaming and having a cat, which is my lips get wicked chapped when I'm streaming. So I put chapstick on, and then the cat comes up and sheds. And if you have chapstick on your lips, you get cat hair all stuck to your face. It's great. Or at least it's great if you love eating cat hair. Soul Ripper is a sack outlet, but like you almost don't need to care about the sack outlet part of it at all. It is just totally acceptable to have a 4/3 for 2 attacker, right? This will definitely see play in any aggressive deck. It's linearly aggressive. It's not really a vehicle that you would use for blocking, but it is very good at being aggressive. I dig it. The fun part is you can just sack whatever you crewed it with if you really want to just get in damage on any specific turn. Could it potentially combo with treasures? It could. I don't know how often you're going to sack stuff unless you really care about the menace on a specific turn. But like, the option is always there. And I don't think you need to ever sack anything to make this into a good card. Or I don't think you need to rely on sacking things for this to be a good card. And I think that's probably why it's a good card. It is already a good card with optional upside. And that's usually a strong recipe. Do we have any cheap steal effects? We don't have Claim the Firstborn anymore. Legal in Standard. Gain control. Sort by mana value. We have Dominating Vampire that steals things equal to the number of vampires you control, but if you're curving out with Soul Ripper, that's not likely to be too many vampires. We have Bloody Betrayal that steals a creature and makes a blood token, which I suppose is interesting because it makes 2 permanents to sack Soul Ripper, but I don't think you want to go that deep in providing stuff for Soul Ripper to eat. Like, I think I would just prefer to be playing stuff on curve. So I guess Dominating Vampire is interesting to me in the sense that you are playing a creature on curve, and you like get to steal their 1-drop and sack it to Soul Ripper, and that's sort of interesting. Sword Point mana value isn't great because they love sticking discounts on it recently. Oh yeah, there is the like 4-drop steal effect that is discounted if you what is it? Target a token or something? But even still, it's not like wicked interesting. And it is annoying that you have to sacrifice the thing before it actually deals damage, which is half the idea. But I guess we have Songmad Treachery, which as a modal double-faced card is kind of interesting. The opportunity cost of including it isn't very high, and it's just pretty good with Soul Ripper as a removal spell. That might be an interesting combo to just play with no real downside. But yeah, I imagine for the most part you're just looking to play Soul Ripper in an aggressive deck, and any sacrifice synergies are kind of just incidental rather than stuff you particularly care about planning out. The cost of including it is Riley driving you mad. Alright, what's the inside joke there? I'm interested. What? Nashi? Yeah, Nashi? Nashi Moonsage's Scion. 1 black for a 3/2 legendary creature rat ninja with ninjutsu 3 black. Whenever Nashi Moonsage's Scion deals combat damage to a player, exile the top card of each player's library. Until end of turn, you may play one of those cards. If you cast a spell this way, pay life equal to its mana value rather than paying its mana cost. What? Oh, pay life equal to. I thought it was saying pay equal to its mana value rather than paying its mana cost, and was so confused what on earth that meant. This is the inside joke for being driven mad. Yellow Hat has a clip of Riley Knight's Zendikar preview, which was a song. Oh, I see. Gotcha. Okay, so how does this work? Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, exile the top card of each player's library, and you may play one of those, including lands, and then pay life equal to its mana value rather than paying its mana cost. That's... You can swap it in with ninjutsu to get its effect on turn 4 reliably, yeah. Nashi is Tamiyo's adopted son. Oh yeah, Moonsage's Scion, literally. Huh. Mono black aggro? Maybe? Does it even need to be aggro? Kitty cat one out. Kitty cat one out. What's he holding in his hand? I assume it's supposed to be some sort of like futuristic laser wrench by the looks of it. I'm assuming this is like doing maintenance on something? Maybe? I mean, that's a wire going up into the ceiling, which makes me think this is some kind of like tech hanger, as opposed to like invading some building and destroying property. Doctor Who Sonic Screwdriver. Yeah, something like that, I think. I mean, I don't know what exactly this goes into or doesn't go into, other than that it seems good against basically everything, right? Anytime you just are getting card advantage. Like, how excited are you to just play this as a 3-drop? I think you're pretty excited playing this as a 3-drop. Well, I guess here's a question for you. If you're playing a random red-black aggressive deck, do you just play this as a 3-drop in your deck with no anticipation of the ninjutsu thing ever coming up? Are you just happy playing this on 3? Is it better than Stormseeker? No, but is it better with Stormseeker? But here's the thing. 3-drops don't have to be better than Stormseeker in a random red-black deck. The question is, what are the other 4 3-drops you play alongside Stormseeker? Previously, the answer was Graveyard Trespasser because there were no other playable 3-drops. Now we have Nashi, and we have Biting Palm Ninja. And did we have something else? Not really. So, like, I could see myself playing a deck with 4 copies of Stormseeker, 2 copies of Nashi, and then, like, 2 or 3 copies of Biting Palm Ninja. How often does this get to successfully attack? I don't know. But maybe enough? Maybe? It does die to Vanishing Verse, and that kind of sucks. No denying that. Why are there rats named Mouse? Well, don't we actually have mouse tokens, too, that aren't rats? Text, mouse. Yes. The only mouses in Magic are the mouse creature tokens that are made by enchanted carriages that aren't rats. They are the only mice in the game. There are no other mice except for the enchanted carriage mice. I think. Right? Type loan, mouse. Oh, nope, not true. Canyon Jerboa is a mouse. That's the only mouse in the game that's actually a creature. Yep, there's a vehicle in Eldraine that makes mice, and there is a creature in Zendikar Rising that is the only mouse card. Isn't it much worse than Florian? Is Moon Sage worse than Florian? I don't know. I mean, Florian, part of the problem is it's not actually a super good 3-drop. Is Nashi a better 3-drop? Maybe? Yeah, I would say that's close, but Florian not dying to Vanishing Verse is pretty appealing, so maybe that's... Maybe Red-Black isn't the deck that wants Nashi. Maybe some other deck. You can technically steal an Ugin and cast him instantly? You could. You could also hit your own expensive cards, so on turn 4 you could Nashi and play Invoke Despair. That's good, right? Florian gets through more easily and triggers off other creatures hitting. Yes, and both cards are card advantage in a sense, but Nashi is also board state acceleration when it connects. It is not to be discounted that Nashi casts a card for no mana. That's big. Forgot about the best use case for Nashi? Well, obviously the best use case is pay 15 life, cast Emrakul, take an extra turn. You can hit a land and play it, but in that case it's kind of similar to Florian. How does Nashi work with March? Badly. You spend 1 life to cast a spell that does nothing. Because if you cast a spell without paying its mana value, X equals 0. You can't cast Ugin instantly, only sorcery. Oh, I see, it's until end of turn. Yeah, so not instant. Not timing restrictions ignored. Florian seems better against other creatures. Florian seems better against other creatures in the sense that the body is better, but the effect once you actually do connect isn't necessarily better, which is to say that Nashi's ninjutsu is good. If you cast like a 5-drop off the top, Nashi's excellent acceleration. That's a big deal. That's a very, very, very big deal. Don't know if ninjutsu needed to cost 4. I think it definitely had to. If you could attack with some random 2-drop and then play Nashi on 3 and then just hit a Lolth, that would, like, be so stupid, right? Can you imagine you have 2 lands in play and your opponent puts a Lolth into play? Yeah, probably too much. You're staring at all the 3-drop interaction in your hand and just go, alright, well, no game for me today. Yeah, I'm excited to play around with that card. Seems fun. Nzumi Blade Blesser. Oh, Lolth and Soren sound like the best hits off Nashi. Just wait until you see somebody cast a Hullbreaker Horror off of Nashi. That'll be real exciting for certain definitions of exciting. Nzumi Blade Blesser. 2 and a black for a 3/2 creature rat samurai. Nzumi Blade Blesser has Death Touch as long as you control an artifact. Nzumi Blade Blesser has Menace as long as you control an enchantment. Cool limited card. Nzumi Prowler. 1 and a black for a 3/1 artifact creature rat ninja. Ninjutsu 1 and a black. When Nzumi Prowler enters the battlefield, target creature you control gains Death Touch and Lifelink until end of turn. I feel like nah, but It is sort of like the Eldraine creature, other than it doesn't have flash. So you can play Nzumi Prowler normally in your first main phase to give an attacker Death Touch and Lifelink. And a 3/1 is not embarrassing to, like, just jam on turn 2. And artifact typing could be relevant. Would it be weird to say I wouldn't actually be surprised if this sees play? But I probably don't expect it to. But, like, I wouldn't be surprised if somebody jams this in a deck. Might not even be bad, necessarily. But yeah, not having flash is definitely probably a downgrade, but not having the restriction of being, like, only Night Tribal is also kind of... Anyway, Okiba Reckoner Raid for a single black. Each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Then exile this saga, then return to the battlefield transformed under your control. As a 2/2 with Menace, and vehicles you control have Menace. Nzumi Road Captain. Speaking of the MIQ, I failed to qualify today with your team or Clover. Oh, sorry to hear it. Was it close? I saw Aaron try it too, so we went with it. Oh. How did Aaron do? I've been missing most of the Twitter conversation over the last... Oh god, it's 2 a.m. and we're only not halfway done. Well, actually, maybe we're exactly halfway... No, we're not halfway done. Seems like a weak 1-drop unless you need the HP. Maybe? I don't know. I mean, like, the fact that it doesn't have haste, again, is kind of slow. If this could attack on turn 3... Oh, no. Go back. There we go. If this could attack on turn 3, I think it'd actually be good. But, like, vehicles you control have Menace is sort of interesting. So, like, turn 1, play this. Each opponent drain... It's a 2-damage burn spell. Alright. Then on turn 3, turns into Road Captain. If Road Captain crews your 2-drop, which it does crew Soul Ripper, is that actually interesting? Aaron got O2 and dropped. Oh no. Oh. Yeah, I do think that Nzumi Road Captain's probably good in exact proportion to the number of 2-drop vehicles you have that have crew 2. Feel like I'd rather just have a 2/1 1-drop. I also agree that is probably the case. But, well, I mean, think of it this way. Comparing Okiba Reckoner to the white equivalent vehicle crewer, which was Hotshot Mechanic, you played on turn 1. Reckoner gets 1 damage in, Hotshot gets 0 damage in. Turn 2, assuming they don't have a way to block Mechanic, Mechanic gets 2 damage in, Okiba gets in the second ping, but Okiba also drew cards. Oh yeah, the artifacts exile instead of transforming so that they, well, 1 can trigger ETBs whenever that's relevant, but 2 re-get Summoning Sickness. It's to protect them from the Chapter 3 sack. Oh, because that's part of the rule. Yeah, that's cute. Otherwise, the resolution of the ability would end up sacking it, but they leave the battlefield before the rule sacks it. That's a cute way for them to have gotten around having to redo the entirety of the rules for sagas. I don't know. Thinking about it that way, if Okiba Reckoners is crewing a vehicle on turn 3, it's technically sort of better than a 1-drop 2-1 in terms of amount of damage done. And if your opponent plays a creature that interacts with a 2-1, it's just actively doing more damage. I think I actually really like this card, but how many vehicles have we seen that have crew 2 so far? This can only crew a 2-2. How many things have crew 4 or crew 3? But also, it's a 2-2 with life or with menace. So it also gets through for more damage than the 2-1 after the point at which it stops crewing. So Mobilizer Mech is crew 3, Mindlink Mech is crew 1. So that doesn't care. So you ever have a moment where 6.5 hours into a stream, when you're starting to lose it and get kind of sleepy, you misread something and you realize with horror that you're going to misread it that way for the rest of your life, constantly? Much in the spirit of how last set we had Mischievous Cat Girl. Just realized I'm going to read this as Fursuit Sentinel for, like, the rest of my life. Because that's definitely what just happened as I was scrolling past it. So, I'm going to have to get used to that. What vehicles did we have in white? Recovery unit? Oh, but our Saga isn't actually a creature on the front, or that would be kind of exciting, huh? Okay, so thus far, it does not seem like if we wanted to do a black vehicles deck, which I guess so far seems to be black-blue, we wouldn't actually be super upset to have played Okiba Reckoner Raid. I think there's 2 good colorless 2-drop vehicles. Okay, alright. I suppose we also needed specifically 2-drop vehicles, didn't we? In order to give the Reckoner haste for that to be relevant. So the 3-drop vehicle actually isn't good enough. We need other 2-drops that have crew 2, specifically. Wouldn't the vehicles deck be banned? I don't know. Haven't seen green yet, but blue and white did seem like one of the vehicles' colors, but then Okiba Reckoner and Soul Ripper also seem like a solid other way to go vehicles. Feel like Hotshot Mechanic would be better as a later drop versus Okiba, though. Okiba would be very dead top deck. I don't know about that, actually. Because Okiba Reckoner as a top deck actually is a burn spell, whereas Hotshot Mechanic as a top deck is kind of just a 2-1. And a 1-mana 2-1 isn't actually very good in a top deck scenario. it's kind of at the point where it's hard to get in, and there's probably going to be a lot of blockers that just totally invalidate it. Whereas Reckoner's a burn spell that also gains you life, that then turns into a 2/2 with Menace that gives your other vehicles Menace. It's kind of good. That's kind of actually really realistic. I feel like I'd actually be surprised if this doesn't see any play at all. Because so far this seems to me like the best one drop to pair with Soul Ripper. There's also this interesting play pattern where Okipa dodges Divine Purge and Doomscar. Doomscar? Oh. Don't forget blue has the Omen Keel Cosima, which is busted in vehicles. That's true. Omen Keel was the good half of that card that nobody managed to make work. 2 mana, 3/3 with crew 1. Yeah, alright. So if we're playing blue-black vehicles, we have Okipa Reckoner Raid on turn 1, into either Soul Ripper or Omen Keel on turn 2, and then we already have our crew. Wait, and then Omen Keel has Menace? Wait, that's actually, like, good, right? That's, like, actually good? That's, like, actually good, though. Maybe yes for vehicles, is it? So far, I don't even know if we want white. Like, the draw to white so far in a vehicles deck was what? Hotshot Mechanic and that cycling thing. Where was it? Somewhere. Oh, Born to Drive. Okay, so I guess the white half was Plow. So white has more stuff that synergizes with the idea of like going blue-white Plow. Black has more stuff that is just blue-black aggressive vehicles. I think the problem is that at the end you have enough vehicles to make this consistent. Well, in blue-black we have access to technically 4 2-drop vehicles if we want to play 4 copies of Omen. Or we have access to 8 2-drop vehicles if we want to play Omen Keel and Soul Ripper. I don't know that we could actually afford to play that many copies of Omen Keel. Technically, they're not like the most legendary because you can play Cosima, which isn't a good card, but it is a playable-ish card. But, I mean, Okipa Reckoner Raid into Soul Ripper I think is the ideal curve there that's just very good. Is there any synergy between ninjas and vehicles? Not that I've seen thus far, necessarily. Vehicles are generally cheaper for their stats than a creature. That is true. That is just generally a truth about all vehicles. Okipa Salvage. 4 and a black for a sorcery. Return target creature or vehicle card from your graveyard to the battlefield, then put 2+1/+1 counters on that permanent if you control an artifact and an enchantment. That seems bad. Reckoner Shakedown. 2 and a black for a sorcery. Target opponent reveals their hand. You may choose a non-land card from it. If you do, that player discards that card. If you don't, put 2+1/+1 counters on a creature or vehicle you control. That seems bad. Reckoner's Bargain. 1 and a black instant. As an additional cast, to cast this spell, sacrifice an artifact or creature. You gain life equal to the sacrificed permanent's mana value. Draw 2 cards. Okay. So this isn't Make a Treasure. Making a Treasure is better than this. But a million % worse than Dispute. Yes. Also probably worse than Village Rites. And I don't think there's any reason to play this over Village Rites. I mean, gaining life is nice, but it's not worth the flexibility of 1 mana. Cosmo, thanks for the follow. Glad you're enjoying the stream. It's probably essential in a black-red sacrifice deck for limited. Yeah, maybe. If that exists. But I don't see this scene play in standard with the options we have, and I certainly don't see it in any older format than that. Return to action. 1 in a black instant. Until end of turn, target creature gets +1/+0 and gains lifelink, and when this creature dies, return to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control. Probably not playable at that mana cost in a constructed format. Soul Transfer. 1 black sorcery. Choose 1. If you control an artifact and an enchantment as you cast this spell, you may choose both. Exile target creature or planeswalker. Return target creature or planeswalker from your graveyard to your hand. Huh. Okay. This is kind of interesting. Exile Hero's Downfall at sorcery speed isn't great. How often do you need this to do both modes for it to be a good card? This kills Edgar. That's true. I'm into killing Edgar. Good with Brushstroke. True. If you have Edgar's Coffin in play and a Meat Hook Massacre, you get both modes. So going back to the original question, then, how often do you need to get both modes for this to be good? I guess that means the question is, how playable is this if it never returns a creature or planeswalker? Is this just good enough if it's exiling stuff at 3 mana at sorcery speed? Still better than Hero's Downfall with only 1 mode. Not having instant speed is kind of bad. And the thing that we're comparing this to, I suppose, is Assassin's Ink. Because Assassin's Ink, if you turn it on, costs 2 mana and is instant speed. Is 2 mana and instant speed for Destroy better than 3 mana always and sorcery for exile plus return to hand? Most of the decks are running Deadly and Geist for ramp, so you'll have artifacts pretty often. Yeah, the versions that have a bunch of treasures and also play what's that enchantment's name? Like 4 copies of Meat Hook Massacre and also the Wedding Invitation. They're probably going to like Soul Transfer a lot, especially because it is just even more mid-range grindy. Is an ink just worse than the one from Strixhaven? What Hero's Downfall do we have from Strixhaven? Soul Transfer, I think, is good in Edgar Mirrors in particular. Yeah. So if White-Black is a good deck, that implies Soul Transfer is the correct card to play in it because you're going to be playing Mirrors. The Golgari one that triggers off life gain. Oh, well, yeah, but you have to have life gain and you have to be in 2 colors, which is, hard to do both of them. But seen play occasionally, but mostly in Historic, in like green-black food decks where life gain triggers happen forever. It's, what is the name of that thing? I played that in a set championship in Niv Mizzet with Lightning Helix. It's... Mortality Spear, that's right, I was never going to remember that. I think Mortality Spear is a lot harder to enable reliably at the timing you're looking for, generally speaking. Yeah, alright. I think I'm on board with Soul Transfer actually being better most of the time. I think I'm on board. Also, there's times where Soul Transfer costs 3 mana for your Exile Doomblade, and in those spots, potentially Assassin's Ink could cost as much as 4 mana, and not being 3 mana could be a bummer. Yeah, alright, I'm on board for Soul Transfer. I see this seeing play, actually. Probably. Tatsunari Toad Rider, 2 and a black for a 3/3 legendary creature human ninja. Whenever you cast an enchantment spell, if you don't control a creature named Kaimi? Yeah, probably Kaimi. Create Kaimi, a legendary 3/3 black and green frog creature token with whenever you cast an enchantment spell, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Pay 1 and a green or blue. Tatsunari Toad Rider and target frog you control can't be blocked this turn except by creatures with flying or reach. So it's supposed to be that you're jumping super high is the flavor? Whenever you play an enchantment is so hard? Is it? Is that actually that hard? I guess that depends entirely on how many enchantments your deck plays, or how many playable enchantments there are, but like, what if your turn 4 is just play Meathook Massacre for 2, you make 2 3/3, well, you have a 3/3 that survives, and you make a 3/3 while you cast Meathook Massacre. Okiba Reckoner is an enchantment. We might end up with enough random enchantments, and if we're trying to go and enable Soul Transfer, that's a random enchantment too. Feel like summoning the 3/3 frog is good enough without the +1, -1 life? Yeah, probably. The random text on the frog is kind of irrelevant, I think. The frog can keep getting summoned. Yeah, if the frog dies, you summon it again. That's kind of a lot tied up for just 3 mana. I don't think you need the activated ability to be relevant for this card to be good, but you do probably need the frog for the card to be good. And the 3-drop slot seems kind of crowded, but if you just have enough enchantments in your deck already, this might be interesting. Tribute to Hirobi, 1 and a black. Saga. Each opponent creates a 1/1 black rat rogue creature token for the first and second Saga mode. Third mode, exile this Saga, then return it to the battlefield transformed under your control. Echo of Death's Wail, 3/3 enchantment creature spirit with flying and haste. When it enters the battlefield, gain control of all rat tokens. Whenever Echo of Death's Wail attacks, you may sacrifice another creature. If you do, draw a card. Okay. So, your opponents get to attack with the black rat rogue creature tokens because they got created during your turn. Yes, the owner of a token is the player under whose control they entered the battlefield. Which is to say they always begin owned and controlled by the same person until some other effect changes their control. I mean, this is 2 mana, I guess. Turn 4, it's a 3/3 flying haste that gains control of rats. You're going to be super sad when your opponent attacks with these 1/1 rat rogues and you're desperate to not kill them, and then they just ninjutsu off the rat rogue and remove it from play. Oh, and it specifies rat tokens, not rat creatures, so you don't get to steal all of their random rats. I don't know, this seems bad. This seems pretty bad, if I'm being honest. It's cute, but bad. So maybe if you're not reliant on the rat tokens and you just want a 3/3 flyer that sacks other creatures to draw cards, maybe then it's like, okay, but I don't know, that seems not good. It seems like a lot of hoops to jump through for something that the payoff isn't stellar. That doesn't sound super appealing, but there are definitely going to be people who want to live the dream, and more power to them. Twisted Embrace. 2 black, enchantment aura. Enchant artifact or creature you control. When Twisted Embrace enters the battlefield, destroy target creature or planeswalker an opponent controls. As long as enchanted permanent is a creature, it gets +1/+1. Huh. Okay, super limited only. I am going to not try to evaluate whether this sucks in limited, because that's going to be a hole that I will fall into and be here for 30 minutes. So let's just move on for the sake of my mental health. Undercity Scrounger. 2 and a black for a 1/4 artifact creature human rogue. Tap to create a treasure token. Activate only if a creature died this turn. Huh. I'm guessing not good. We already have the 1/4 that comes with the built-in sacrifice for treasures that makes the token for free when it enters the battlefield instead of waiting through Summoning Sickness. Yeah, okay. Seems like nothing. Unforgiving One. 2 and a black for a 2/3 creature spirit with menace. When Unforgiving One attacks, return target creature card with mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, where X is the number of modified creatures you control. Equipment, auras you control, and counters are modifications. Okay. Huh. That's potentially interesting. It's kind of difficult to jump through the hoops to get a bunch of mana value stuff, but like, if this is getting 2 drops back, maybe it could work. But 3 mana is a lot. A pretty contentious spot. I don't see this actually going anywhere, especially because the power isn't terribly aggressive, but I'd like to believe. Anyway, Virus Beetle, 1 and a black for a 1/1 artifact creature insect. When it enters the battlefield, each opponent discards a card. Yeah, this is better than Burglar Rats, right? I don't think that's, like, good, but artifact type is cool. Technically. Two of them and a welder stops opponent from casting non-instants for the rest of the game. Wait, what are we talking about now? Two of and a welder. Choose target artifact a player controls and target artifact card in that player's graveyard. Okay, so 1 beetle in the play and 1 beetle in the yard. You goblin welder them back on their draw step every turn. That's cute. Do we have any effects like that anywhere in from historic to standard? I guess we have... What's Tinker Tom's actual name? Fiddlebender? Sacrifice an artifact. Search your library for an artifact card with mana value equal to 1 plus the... Oh, you can't even get lower if you want to. That's not helpful. Goblin Engineer. When Goblin Engineer enters the battlefield, you may search your library for an artifact card, put it into your graveyard, then shuffle your library. Red, sacrifice an artifact, return target artifact card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that functions. That plays. It's even instant speed. Is that it? It isn't historic. Alright. Engineer does work the same way. I don't think that's good, but that is extremely cute. Alright. Historic, red-black. If I call it trash, that's only because it's like a trash for treasure effect, right? Not because I'm implying anything undue about the archetype, technically. We can build red-black trash. Red-black Herald of Anguish. Oh, yeah, maybe. Alright, you are already dead. Single black instant, destroy target creature that was dealt damage this turn, draw a card. That's cute. Not good, but it's cute. I appreciate the name. This card is amazing to name with Pithing Needle. True! This changes the game on every card that asks you to name an effect. You're playing an Enchantress. You got lethal on board. You drop your Gideon's Intervention, naming you are already dead. Alright. So this card has a big impact on the competitive metagame for a lot of decks that it isn't in. I dig it. I dig it a lot. Alright, well, took us 2.5 hours, but we got through black.